In a world where justice is supposed to be blind, there are those who believe the scales are tipped in favor of the powerful. The ones who are meant to protect us are often the ones who cause the most harm. The police force, sworn to serve and protect, have become a symbol of fear and mistrust for many. And the court system, designed to ensure justice for all, has failed time and time again. But there are those who refuse to be silenced, who fight for change, and who demand accountability. Join our host, former Texas police officer and major crimes detective, Justin Carlson, on a journey through the darkness as he shines a light from his extensive 14 years of experience on police injustice and the failed court system. And as he speaks with the many others who have also experienced injustice. This is Failing Justice.
Welcome to the Failing Justice podcast. I am your host, as always, Justin Carlson. I have my co-host Preston with me.
Hey man, how you doing?
Preston Green, doing good. Welcome to the show. We are so grateful that you are all here. We had a great show a couple weeks ago that is now out. Please head over to all of our social media platforms to look at that at Failing One Justice. That's on YouTube. You can also download it wherever you get your podcast. So I'm just going to jump right into the show tonight. Super excited to have a guest with us. We have Cheryl Morris. Cheryl Morris is out of New York, and I want to tell you a little bit about her real quick. So Cheryl worked for the New York State Police Department of Corrections. The New York, not State Police, New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. She was there for 3 decades in the central office, minimum, medium, and maximum security prisons. Cheryl started as a correctional counselor and rose through the ranks as senior counselor at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. She was assistant director for guidance and counseling, as well as director of Ministerial, Family, and Volunteer Services. And in addition to creating programs and training for both staff and justice-impacted individuals, Cheryl is also a skilled policy developer and reentry services architect. And she is now retired, but since retiring, she is now a criminal justice consultant, helping advocates to advocate their mission in the most impactful manner as possible. I had connected with Cheryl, it's been a couple months ago now, but ever since then, we planned to get her on the podcast, and I'm super glad that she's here. And Cheryl, I just want to welcome you and say thank you for joining us. Say hello to our audience.
Hello, good evening, everybody.
And again, thank you for. I know I kind of gave you a little introduction, but why don't you? You probably can do a better job of that than I can. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your experience?
Sure. Thank you again. So I'll just add a little bit to what you shared with everyone. Throughout my career, and a 30-year career with Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, all on the program services side. And as a counselor, I facilitated programs, but as I rose through the ranks, starting with Sing Sing, I was able to develop programs that would help individuals who were on their way home to hopefully be more successful in their journey and not come back into the system, because all too often we see that revolving door where people leave on parole and within a few months or a year, they're back in. So we try to prepare them to be able to go home and stay home. I was promoted from there to central office as a assistant director for guidance and counseling. And in that introductory role as an administrator, I started to see the other side of corrections as far as the policy making. I knew the back end as far as enforcing the policies and following these rules, but to be able to see how it all started kind of brought me full circle. And it it made me want to learn more because I, like many people, did not necessarily agree with what we were doing in the agency. Um, but I also know as a paramilitary agency, we had to follow direction. So being able to see how the process started and then also seeing how it ended, it helped me get a better understanding on how maybe some things could be changed for the better of everyone. So I had limited authority at that point, but my next promotion to Director of Ministerial, Family, and Volunteer Services gave me a lot of flexibility to not only give opinions on what we could do to make make our rehabilitative process better for everyone, but it also gave me a voice with other decision makers and an ability to create some policies. And I did draft many policies for the agency, and I would like to think that it made the justice impacted individuals stay more productive as well as staff. Um, I created trainings for staff as well as the incarcerated population. I worked with community-based organizations in developing some reentry services programs for the people who were on their way home. And it was just a really good experience to not only see and understand, but be a part of some of those changes. So um, I got, I think I learned quite a bit. I worked a lot with the Attorney General's office because my position as the director also introduced me to the world of litigation. And two of the areas that I oversaw, it was very litigious, and that's religious accommodations and family services. So we were in court all the time. And what I learned was um, attorneys in particular, and some judges, they know the law, but they didn't know corrections policy. And that might sound a little odd because you would think that policies would emulate the law, and in many cases, they don't. So I spent a lot of time with the attorneys and explaining to them or interpreting corrections policies in a way that helped us both to find a happy medium on how to incorporate the law into the policy before everything was turned over to the courts and a judge would make a decision. Because once that judge made a decision or gave that order, we had to comply, which made everybody's life more difficult because corrections policies are legislatively driven. So we weren't able to just flip the switch and make changes. And my thinking was be proactive and try and find a way to resolve the issue before someone from the outside does it for you. And I did that. It was very tiresome. So in 2016, I decided I wanted to go back to the prisons, and that's where I finished out my career. I went to two more maximum security prisons: Eastern Correctional Facility, Coxsackie Correctional Facility, and I retired from Coxsackie in February of 2022 as a deputy superintendent for program services.
And so I have a lot of questions about that. But before I get there, tell us about what you do now since retiring. That's something that interests me, and I believe would interest the audience as well.
Okay, well, I spent more than half my life growing up in corrections. I like to tell people I did a 30-year bid, so I totally understand uh, what that means because those gates closed behind me in the morning and I was locked in like everyone else. I was just blessed to be able to go home at the end of the day. So when I left correction, to be honest, I wasn't prepared for that life afterwards. I did not realize how programmed I was. I was extremely programmed. Um, so it took me probably a good 8 months to try and figure out who I was again and what it is that I wanted to do because I knew I wanted to work. I just didn't know what to do. And because I know corrections, I actually picked up my master's in criminal justice. So I knew I wanted to do something still connected in the field and be impactful. I saw some things I didn't agree with while I was working, but because of the restrictions that came with the job, I was only allowed to go so far in trying to make some changes. But now that I'm out in the society, I don't have the restrictions, and it feels really good. So I feel fortunate to have brought the knowledge outside the gate with me and to be able to share that with advocates and whomever who's trying to make a change for the people who are still inside the system and hopefully will come home one day, and give them every opportunity to come home and be successful and stay home. So I am now a criminal justice consultant. I have a lot to share with people who want to make change, but right now I'm focusing on helping people do policy reform, people who are working with the prison policy reform space and reentry services. So I offer assistance in developing um, reentry programs that of a substance. And I'm not trying to insult any organization out there who's providing reentry services, but what I've seen is many of those programs offer the same, they take the same approach. They meet the individual when they come home and they start to offer services, whether it's mental health, substance abuse, aggression, whatever it is that they need. And I think that they need to have that connection with the individual way before they leave the prison.
Right.
I think that there needs to be a very detailed discharge plan, and some of those services need to have been connected. They need to have been connected before they walk out the door. I have ideas on how to do that. And because the culture is the culture that it is, it's not an easy process, but I believe it's doable. I believe that if people really want to address a problem, whether it's rehabilitation, whether it's recidivism, whatever it is, if you're genuinely interested in making it better, then all stakeholders have to come to the table. You have to share like your ideas. You formulate that plan and understand and respect the fact that everybody has a piece of that puzzle. And without everyone's piece being contributed, you will never have a complete process. So I believe that there's a lot of work that needs to be done when it comes to um, impactful reentry services. Um, and I believe that, again, everyone should be at that table. It should be prison administrators, it should be security personnel, it should be the justice impacted individual, there should be community-based organizations, there should be some political influences sitting in those rooms too, because a lot of what's needed will need some political backing.
Wow. So I really love just about everything you said. Really, there wasn't anything that you said that I disagree with in any way. One question I have is, you mentioned feeling free and like you have the ability to actually do something and make a change, because when you were within, it was hard to do. Now you said you put some policies together and that you did implement some positive change. But I want to talk about that for a minute. Why do you think, and it really stuck out to me when you said it, why do you think that it is so hard? Because Preston and I can both attest to this, that when we are active, so we're both law enforcement, we're cops, but there's so much change that we see that is wrong, which is the point of why we started Failing Justice in the first place. But so many things that we can change, but we cannot get people to listen. We've always done it this way, and we're always going to do it this way. And I know that could be a very broad question, but because there's so many things that do affect that. I know it's not just a simple answer, because there's a lot of, it's a big wheel. There's a lot of things surrounding that. But why is it that you think that it's so hard when you want to make a positive, impactful change that's going to help people? Why do you think that's so hard to do when you're active and you're inside and you're working versus, I mean, it's still hard on the outside, but I mean, it's almost like people don't want to listen when you're active. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I know that's how we feel on our end.
I don't feel you're wrong at all. And I think there are many reasons why the challenges are the challenges that we face. And I think at the top of the list is fear, right? And it's fear coming from different sides. First of all, there's fear coming from the individual who sees something is wrong, because you become a minority at that point. Many people see something wrong, but they keep their mouths shut for fear, all right? Fear of retaliation, fear from supervisors and colleagues, fear of isolation. When you work, in my opinion, in a paramilitary agency, especially in a prison. Now, as a police officer, you guys have the freedom to go out in the community. Part of your job allows you that outside connection. But when you're in a prison, like I said, we're locked in there 8, 10, 12 hours a day with justice impacted individuals, with your colleagues, with your supervisors. So fear is at the top of the list. You understand, security personnel in the prisons use fear to control the justice impacted individual. Our leadership uses fear to control the people who go against their agenda. And our leadership, I believe, fear the possibility of losing power. You know, if you sit down and you agree that what you're doing is not necessarily right and fair, then you're giving up some of your power. And just like a child who has a toy doesn't want to share with someone else, I kind of parallel some of the leadership with the power that they have, not feeling that they can't, if they make a change, that's a sign of weakness and they lose power.
Right.
This culture has been around for so long and it's really controlled by a minority.
Yeah.
And they're controlling us with their iron fist because that's the only way they know how to do that versus sitting down and being collaborators. They're rulers. So I say that it's fear at the core of why people can't do what needs to be done and what should be done.
I would highly agree with that. You have to have a job, right? So if you see something wrong and you want to stand up and you want to change it, well, you fear doing that because that's your livelihood. You know, that's your paycheck. That's the food in your mouth, the gas in your car. And I completely agree with you 100% because I know there's a lot of individuals that I've encountered over the years, and myself included. A lot of my coworkers and myself, we see something that's going on and we want to say something, but then the fear is, okay, what if this other person what if their job's more important? I think fear is a big one. I mean, and I think you could probably piggyback on that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we all fear something. I think you could also say that I believe convenience has something to do with it too. You know, it's much more convenient just to do what everybody else is doing and not have to deal with the pushback or, and you know, a lot of times trying to change something takes a whole lot more effort, and you got to get buy-in. You got to get other people on board. So, just listening to your story, it is just so identical to, I think, the battle that we fight internally, on the law enforcement side outside of, the prison system. It's just, I'll be honest, I did not expect it to be that identical. I mean, there's just so many similarities, from leadership, from, it sounds like a policy standpoint. I mean,
political,
but I would agree with something I would imagine inside you have no other option but the authority hierarchy. I mean, that's it. I mean, you made a good point. We can go out and talk to the community, and we have some more resources, but this is, and I guess I would ask, what was your biggest challenge when it came to changing something? Do you think there was more? Did you experience more challenges on the administrative side when you were trying to change and influence policy, or did you see more challenges when more on the operational side and maybe trying to change and influence the way maybe some of your peers or coworkers were doing things?
I think I felt my challenges were equal from both sides. They probably were a little more stressful from the administrative side, and I'll tell you why. It's a good old boy network, and I'm a Black female. So our leadership, unfortunately, and a lot of people, not just leadership, they are more comfortable seeing people who look like me in a green uniform with a number attached to your chest because you can control them.
Right.
I made it very clear I was not going to be bought and controlled. I will be compliant because that's what my job requires me to do. I will not look the other way because I understand and I feel ethics are ingrained within me.
Right.
So that made me a target. It made me a target from my supervisors. It made me a target from some of my coworkers who were loyalists to some of the leadership. And if I were in the prison, it also made me a target with some of the justice impacted individuals because I believe that they are just conditioned to always look at staff as them against us. And that's not true with everyone. You have a lot of staff who really try to give good advice to these guys and these women on how to stay out of trouble, how to do your time and go home and stay home and look at your life in a different way than you did when you were in the street. There are a lot of good staff in the prison system. They want to do a good job, but they want to go home safe at the end of the day with families. And no one should have to be put in a position to choose one or the other. And I think that we were put in those positions every single day. As a policymaker, I saw things that were wrong, blatantly wrong, that impacted staff as well as the justice impacted individual. And let me tell you, it took some time for me to build up the courage to speak at some of those tables. And the fear was in me. We talked about fear a few minutes ago because I was not a part of the majority. But I was raised by my mom and her mother, and they were very hard workers. They were very honest people, and that was instilled in me. And I knew I had to speak up. I was one of the first people in the family to be able to graduate college. So they sacrificed so that I could have a better life for them. Then God put me in a position to have a voice for people who didn't have a voice. So I had a platform, and just like you guys have right now, and it was my responsibility to use that platform and my voice to try to make a difference. So I had to put the fear of what was going to happen to me to the side because there was a bigger picture. And let me tell you what was even more frightening for me, that, the security staff, the program staff that I worked with, and I would think that you guys too had union protection. When I got into certain positions, I didn't have union protection anymore. I was in an appointed position the last 10 years of my career. So they didn't really have to justify why they got rid of me. So I had to learn how to play that game to a point, to be able to go right to the edge and not push the envelope totally over. And it wasn't easy.
Yeah, it's a constant. You said the right word there. You had to learn to play the game. I always use the I always say that I've got to be playing chess while everybody else is trying to figure out how to play checkers. And, because and that's the political side of the job, I think, is having to play that game. And, so we both work in Texas. We have some municipalities and agencies that would be like a civil service, which might have some similar union protections, but most of us are at will. We have associations that'll help us out if we need it. But I hear stories from officers who work in union environments, and if I was to hear those same stories here where we're not union protected, I think there'd be different outcomes sometimes. So, but yeah, I would agree that once you get in a position administratively to make a positive impact, influence some change, that is, I think that fear does increase a little bit, because I think you become even more of an easier target to get out of the way if they don't like what you're saying or coming up with or trying to implement.
They could fire you for anything. And I would think that the general public, like if they had knowledge of this, if the general public had knowledge that there are people like Cheryl, people like you and I, or other good people who worked in prisons or who are police officers or who are in the system, who took an oath or in the system in some way, if they knew that we had zero protection for when we stood up and try to do something right, I think the general public, those that care, would have a problem with it. But it's just one of those things that those associations that we have done me no good. I've had to contact them 3-4 times in my career. And one of the times got me 45 days without pay when there was clear policy violations on the other side, on the administrative side. They completely violated their own policy.
Yeah.
And TMPA, Texas Municipal Police Association, they didn't do a squat for me.
Yeah, well, 9 times out of 10, the policy will protect the ones who are implementing the policy, right? Or have the authority to put the policy out, and it just doesn't apply to them, which is very strange.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of policies that will always, somewhere at the end of it or in the beginning, it'll have some sort of line that's like, and everything contained herein is subject to change anytime at the discretion of the administrator.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I guess if they violate their policy, then they can just say, well, it didn't apply at that time.
Yeah. And
of course. I'm sorry. I mean, we were kind of trained too. When we write our policies, people would be like, this is so vague. It's either black or white. And, when I'm working or was working, I couldn't say, yeah, it is. This is intentional. We're trained to write the policy to be vague just for the reason that Preston just mentioned, Yeah.
They want to have that catch-all.
Yeah.
And I've got a love-hate relationship with policy. I'm going to have to be real honest with you. I'm, Justin and I will often get in little arguments because we'll have differences of opinion in practice sometimes. And because I would like to say it at heart, at times I'm a cop's cop, and I think that there's times that you've got to go out there and do good police work, and then I also think that there's other times where policy is very very much needed and practical, but I think it's finding that sweet spot, and I also do think, especially on the law enforcement side, I don't know how it is on the correctional side, but I think that we go, I would say we have our seasons with policy. So we'll have maybe 5, 6, 7 years where you'll notice that policy is we're very policy heavy, and it's very, like you said, black and white, and we'll drive it home, and then we'll have a season where we're not very policy driven, and we'll just kind of brush it under the rug or look the other way. So at least that's my take on the law enforcement side. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, Carlos, and you've been in it quite a bit longer than I have. But
no, I agree. I would be curious to, see what Cheryl's position was on that experience.
I don't find it to be seasonal in corrections, at least not in New York. What I think it is, what I see more is discretionary, depending upon who the person is.
There's that
If
too.
if you're one of the connected golden children, then because if you did wrong or you pissed off one of those protected golden children, then yes, policy is definitely thrown down your throat, because now it's a way to hold you accountable for some things that may not be your fault, but you kind of didn't follow every single step the way it was written. Now, if that golden child violates the policy, then it's the opposite. That's when they want to turn their head and look the other way and make up all these excuses. So I don't think it's seasonal as far as having a stretch of time, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, where you're policy driven and then you kind of fall back. It's a case by case basis, and depending who the characters are, that's when policy becomes important or not.
And in your experience, do you touched on a key word there, discretion? I mean, what is your take on discretion, and when it relates to policy? Do you think that we need to have that ability, or is it is it a culture thing maybe with discretion, or what's your take on discretion?
I think it is a culture thing, but I also feel that it is necessary depending in certain circumstances. I don't believe that even in a paramilitary organization that you have to follow the policy to the T in every single situation. So for instance, let's just say we had someone's family visiting them in the visiting room, right? And our policy is everybody's supposed to sit in their own seat at that table. Yeah, that's the policy. But if a child is visiting a parent who's incarcerated, then it doesn't do any damage to let that child sit on that parent's lap.
Amen.
Or,
Exactly.
There's supposed to be a short embrace at the beginning and the end of the visit. Well, if you did a couple in between the visit, yeah, that's against policy, but I think discretion should be used, and it's common sense that there's no harm being done.
Absolutely.
So I think that depending on the situation and the impact of of enforcing the policy or using some discretion, it depends on what that situation is,
right.
Where, common sense would allow you or dictate you to use some discretion.
And it also depends on who's enforcing the policy too. So you have, just like in police work, I'm sure it's the same within corrections. You have your correction officers who are just, they don't operate outside of what's written. They think, they like to play hardball. They don't. Me and Preston always equate it to it comes down to having heart, right? So if you're in the job, doing the job for the right reasons, and your heart and your mind is in the right place, I think proper discretion will be used. So I think it depends on who the person is that, that's specifically speaking corrections, that's enforcing that policy. And I agree with you on the visits. that's something that I wanted to bring up anyway. So I'm kind of glad it came up on these. And I the term that you use, and I actually had never heard it until you used it. Justice impacted individuals, and when we're speaking of those individuals, everything has been stripped away from them. Some of it, and I can tell you just from what we have been doing on this side of things, we realize that there are a lot of people in prison and in those situations who, number one, shouldn't be, or number two, maybe they did do something wrong, but their punishment was extremely egregious. And so those are real people too, right? Those same people, you cut them, no matter what color their skin are, they're going to bleed red. They still got a heart inside their chest that's beating. And we were never, I'm going to be honest with you, Cheryl, we were never, at least I wasn't. And I've touched on this before on some podcasts. I was never taught that we have to treat these people with respect. And maybe that's because I come from a little bit older school of policing. Maybe they teach it differently now. I don't know. But I know when I went through the police academy, they always told us, these people, they're going to lie to you. They're going to want to kill you. Your job is to go home safely, and it's not anything more than that. Now, clearly, while those things are important, because there are people that are going to lie, there are people that are going to want to kill you, but we were just never taught to treat those people like human beings and people. And I went, sometimes I get really down and sad because I went so far into my career just all about myself and all about stats and all about arrests. And I look back on that, and this is kind of a deep conversation, but I look back on that and I wonder, who did I impact negatively that maybe still to this day they're dealing with, maybe the way I handled something or maybe the way I treated them. And so my point to all this, I'll bring it home, is that these are human beings, and I feel like they're not treated as such sometimes. Like you mentioned, their families coming to visit them and, their kids sitting on their lap. Like they are losing. I mean, let's talk about the kids for a minute. The kids are impacted by this because their parents are incarcerated and they need their parents. So, and I know there's people in the world that want to, I know why those policies exist. Hey, kids shouldn't sit on your lap or whatever. I know why some of those policies exist, but at the same time, where's the happy medium in that discretion? At what point do you implement that and understand, hey, these are people too, these are kids too, these people are impacted. And our job as, public servants is to have heart and still treat these people with dignity and respect, and treat them as if, we would want to be treated if we were in that situation or one of our family members was in that situation. You get what I'm saying?
I totally get what you're saying. And I want to make sure I'm not painting the wrong picture in people's minds about, and I can speak just from the corrections side personally. I do know people in other law enforcement agencies, but I cannot speak from firsthand knowledge. So in corrections, I would venture to say that, and you said, maybe you were trained that way because you're a little older, but I worked with people who are a lot older than you. I've worked with some people who were in their jobs for 50 years, and I could never survive that long in that environment. But, yes, I would say in New York, some of the old schoolers, when they came through the academy, they were taught that, these are not necessarily humans. You don't look at them that way. They are, people that have committed all these crimes, and you treat them that way. And that's not the way they should be looked at, because I've already been punished when they got their sentence and, the journey began. But, I would say I ran across more staff, and I'm talking security staff now, who have this heart that you mentioned. And like I said, they did try to give advice. Some of them took on the role as mentor, teacher, in some cases, father figures, because I worked in all male prisons. But at one point, one of the prisons I worked in, we had to incorporate some of the most problematic youth from the juvenile system. They actually put them in adult prisons, and though they were terrified when they came in there. So some of our staff even became a parent figure to some of the incarcerated individuals. So I'm going to say the majority of the people do have a heart, do try to help maintaining certain boundaries, but we have some bad characters who in every industry, and they act out and they gain the most attention, and what the public sees is not positive, and everybody gets cast under that same cloud. But I don't feel that's true. And I know it's another time in another conversation, Justin, but I think I shared when we spoke one of our other conversations that there needs to be, in my opinion, more focus being put on your staff who are working in these prisons as well, because our leadership says staff are the most valued resources they have. They say this to the public, but behind closed doors, you're treated so much differently. You're not acknowledged. You're treated like garbage. And you want to talk about trauma. Yes, trauma is real for the person who's serving a sentence, but trauma is real for the staff as well. Like I said, we're locked up in there. I work 10 hours a day because I had to get my work done. Security staff, most of them, they get mandated to do double. So you're working 16 hours a day, sometimes longer. And so that weighs on you mentally. Staff suicide rates, staff mental health, staff substance abuse, staff DV, all those numbers are high, and it doesn't make it out to the public for different reasons. But if you have a damaged staff person, you can imagine how they're going to treat their spouse and their children at home. And then they're bringing that same anger and frustration to work, and they're taking it out on the people that they feel they can take it out on, which are the incarcerated individuals. And that's what makes it to the public. So I think that leadership now has a responsibility to put staff wellness on their agenda and make sure you have a healthier staff. You have a healthier staff, you're going to have a more positive and productive employee. And that also helps shape the environment that we all have. Well, I don't have to anymore, that people have to go into every single day.
Absolutely. I think that leaders would realize that they would, if they would spend more time serving the ones who are serving others, you'll see a better result in the long run, I think. Maybe not immediately, but investing that time in your employees and making sure, like you said, it's a healthy environment for them at work. Their mental health and wellness is important, and that will benefit them at home. That way they'll make it back to work. And like you said, maybe not get caught up in a domestic violence situation or a DWI because they, are dealing with a substance issue. I think that's critical right now, and probably both professions, is that leaders start embracing servant leadership and truly focusing a majority of their time and effort on their staff, because that's who they have a responsibility to, because those employees or members of the organization have a responsibility to go out there and serve.
Yeah, I mean, you don't take, without a staff, you don't have an organization. Like, you got to have staff to take care of all the people that are incarcerated. And you're absolutely right, Cheryl. That is a big key. But the problem is, I think everything we talk about on this show, and when we have all these conversations, everything can go all the way back to failure in leadership. And I mean, it literally all starts there. Because if you're failing there, everything else is going to fail. And you're right. Staff it's a big one. I mean, it is a big one.
It is huge. And I'm going to say to you, in New York, we have some staff who are, the cost of everything is sky high. So we have a lot of people who feel they kind of resent the very population that they're charged to protect, because they feel like, why are these incarcerated individuals being given a free education and I have to pay student loans for myself or my kid, because in New York, a person can come in and not know how to read, but they can go home with a master's degree. Most of our prisons offer some type of college program, maybe not a full program. It could be just a certificate, but many offer, an associate's, and others may offer a bachelor's. And we have a few that even offer a master's program. So there's some resentment there because look at the amount of money. And I paid for both of my degrees. So there's some resentment there. But what people also don't always look at is it's not the taxpayers' money. Up until a few years ago in New York, everything was privately funded as far as the college programs. And now the guys and the women can get TAP and Pell, but that's federal money. So it's not our state dollars that's paying for these people to get an education. But they also, I think our staff need to understand that that education is key. If we send a person home better equipped as far as education, as far as a vocational skill, as far as them understanding that they have mental health issues that need to be monitored and taken care of for the rest of their lives, we're sending home a person that's not as broken as they were when they came through the door. So there's a possibility that they will be successful this time. And here's the other thing. When a person comes home, there's no particular area that they're going to live in. They could be your neighbor, my neighbor, work next to my child or family member. So you want them to be their best self because so much is at stake. We're talking public safety.
If only people could grasp that. And, on the street level, again, going back to my training when I was in the academy and then when I got on the street as a rookie, our job, you're just cuff them and stuff them, right? And you don't think anything else about it, what kind of person they are. And especially if they have a history, God forbid somebody have a history and you run into them on the street and you're like, oh, well, he's just a lowlife. He's a loser. She's a lowlife. She's a loser. There's no hope. And that's not okay. That is a mindset that has to be changed. And, when you're dealing with it all the time, and you're constantly seeing negative, I understand some things, but at the same time, I've met so many good people that have come out of prison that were either wrongfully convicted or maybe that they did do something wrong, but they came out of prison on the top side because somebody cared about them. These people, a lot of them, they know, like, hey, these people, these cops, these correction officers, they don't care about me. They don't care about my family. And if we set them up for success, we do everything we can to set them up for success. And some of them aren't. Some of them are going to make their decisions. That's on them. But I think you're right. Public safety, it is also our job to ensure that these people are their best when they get out. Because you made a good point. I mean, we're going to be out there dealing with them, not only just as law enforcement, but as average citizens at the grocery store or at the movie theater, whatever the case may be. And of course, you got to have heart for that too, right? Cheryl, I mean, would you think that there's a heart problem?
Oh, definitely. There's definitely a heart problem. And where does it begin? I have some ideas, but it's people, the three of us right now, we're not the ones that can make the change. I think we may be able to start the ball rolling, but you need a huge network. the stakeholders, some of the stakeholders that I mentioned earlier when I said we need to have, all these people involved when it comes to reentry. You need to have a network when you want to do reform, and be prepared for the long haul. Because again, when you give someone something, and in this case, I'm talking about power, and it's so ingrained, in decades long, that the culture, it's not going to be easy to get them to give it up or be more flexible. Not necessarily give it up, but you have to be more flexible. It's not an autonomy, but they've been allowed to create one, and it's not working. So something has to change. But part of the fight is to make them see that you can't be in control the way you have been. This is a shared effort, and it's not about just you and your inner circle. In New York State, at one point, we had 70 prisons. We had, a few years ago, it was like probably 80,000 employees. And then you have to figure out, how many incarcerated individuals we had. Now, the numbers are a lot lower now. We're down to 40 something prisons. But the thing is, they've been controlled and ruled a certain way for so many years, and it hasn't gotten better. Recidivism rate hasn't gotten better with all the money that these states and the federal government is throwing out into reentry and rehabilitation. Recidivism numbers should be way less than what they are, and they're not much different than what they were 20 years ago. Why? Because people are doing the same thing over and over again, looking for different results. You have to try something new.
Yeah. And sometimes new is scary, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Well, I really like your mindset. I mean, I think you're spot on with everything, because in these mindsets, especially like with Preston and I, we're active law enforcement. And sometimes, or a lot of times rather, it is so hard to get people to come on this show who are active within in whatever capacity in the criminal legal system. I mean, from, police chief, district attorney, assistant district attorney, just police officer, correction officer, whatever you name it. And I think that goes back to the fear. And for the life of me, I can't understand why we can't just release, and the fear ties back to the power.
Yes.
These people are fearful because of the power that others have over them. And so it's all connected. And, for the life of me, I can't understand why we would have a better world, a better country, if we just would take some of these things to heart. I know a lot of good, we talk a lot on here about bad things and bad police officers, but I also know a lot of good ones. And if we could just get, Richard Miles said something. He was a gentleman who was wrongfully convicted, and he was on my podcast, and several things he said stood out. But one of the things that he said was, he's like, I love your platform, and I think you're doing great. He said, I really think once you start to have people sitting at this table who are active within the professions, within the legal system professions, he's like, then I think you will start to really see impact. But it's hard. It's hard to get those people to come speak. And that's why you have, I don't know how it is in corrections, but like on the law enforcement side, you have officers leaving by the, dozens and dozens and dozens because they're tired of it. Do you see that in corrections as well? Correction officers leaving because they want to make a difference, but they got a wet blanket over them and they're not allowed to make change. Is that something that you see there too?
Well, I see people leaving, not just corrections, state government employees are leaving. As many of them are waiting until they can retire. because they're just done with the environment that they work in, especially corrections. But some of the younger people in corrections, I saw a lot of them leave and go to the state police thinking that the grass is greener on the other side. And what they found out is it wasn't, but it did pay better. So I guess that was a trade-off for them. The people that are leaving in corrections, like I said, if they can retire, that's what they're doing. And they're not staying involved in the industry because they're just worn out from it. It drained them. And corrections, again, they're very reactive instead of proactive. So now they're not only facing a staffing shortage, but they didn't, the geniuses weren't thinking when they were pushing people out of the door that you're not pushing away your so-called troublemakers. You're also getting rid of your knowledge. I took 30 years of experience with me, and there was nobody that, not that I was asked, but there was nobody that I was training to do my job officially. Ideally, you would have somebody shadowing me for 5 to 6 months. And not just me, but people with my kind of knowledge and experience, 20, 30, 40 years just leaving. And so now you're at a shortage. You are taking lesser qualified people. Yes, you're paying them less money, but they're less productive, and they're walking around with no clue. No clue. That's dangerous.
It is dangerous.
It's dangerous for them. Yeah.
And one thing that I want to piggyback on with that is these so-called leaders, which at the end of the day, they're just managers, poor managers is what I call them. They don't want those under them to be smarter than them or to have more knowledge than them, because they're, if they keep you suppressed, they don't have to worry about that fear of you potentially taking their job. But like you said, Preston's talked about it before. Like, I want people under me that are smarter than me, that are going to help me make good decisions, and that way when I leave, they can take over. Because at the end of the day, when we're playing these internal politics and with all of these things, guess who not only are the ones who are affected, right? Nobody wins in that situation. And
that's true.
Nobody wins.
That's true. And whether we call them leaders or managers or whomever, I think an effective one, because this is how I ran my areas. I found people who had the most potential who worked for me. And I tried to build on what they had, as far as I trained them. I showed them how to do my job from top to bottom. And I had colleagues who told me that they didn't agree with that because of what you just said. Oh, they may take your job. And my response was, well, first of all, any job I take, I'm not taking it hoping to stay here until I retire. I'm taking it as a stepping stone for something bigger and better after I get whatever knowledge and experience I can from this job. So I'm not worried about them doing that. And right now I'm very comfortable in my ability to do my job. So I don't feel threatened. But the other piece is, I feel like, if I'm training these people, I can minimize them calling me when I do take a vacation or I do take a day off. They're not calling me asking me what to do. Things are running the way they would if I was still there. But the bigger picture for me is, if they're successful after I leave, I take that as a start as far as my legacy. I still get credit for training them and that they're able to pick up where I left off seamlessly. So it's a win-win for me, because managers, I think, wear many hats, and one of them is a mentor. You need to professionally develop your staff. That's your responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we lack so much, I think, in our profession too. It sounds like there are some similarities, is, we do lack those that are wanting to mentor those. But I tell you what, there's some people that I've had above me in my career that I have zero respect for, and because that's what happens when this continues and continues and continues, and it's a constant problem. You get ran into the ground, and there's a certain point to where you have no respect for that person, and and then that's just toxic. Like you said, then it's affecting those we are supposed to be taking care of and serving. You know, in our case, it would be the citizens of our community, and in your case, it would be the justice impacted individuals. No, they are not getting the service that they deserve because we're sitting around playing games internally rather than thinking about, hey, why are we here? What is the purpose of us, you know, wearing this uniform, being in this facility, being out here on the street, whatever the case may be? What is our purpose? And it's service to others. And that is just lost. It's lost. And that's why we're having a lot of the problems that we have.
Yeah, it's lost. And I know I'm looking at the clock, but I'd like to throw this in there if I can. You said, some good cops, and I know you do. And I know some good, corrections staff. There are a lot. One of the things, though, I think is as far as an issue in corrections, and it's probably similar in other areas of law enforcement, is that you get the newer generation of the people coming out of the academy. They might be trained to see justice impacted individuals as human beings and, treat them as such. But if they are, I think that it is sabotaged when they hit the prison, because now your OJT starts. And who's going to train them? Old timers who have those same, their thought process has not changed. It's just as outdated as they are. So for that new jack who's coming in the door, they need that old timer for two things: to hopefully lead them down the right path, and some will and some won't. But again, if they go against that old timer, what comes up? That word fear again. You understand? Because that blue wall is real. That blue wall is real, and even if you wear blue, sometimes that wall is put up in front of you if you choose a certain path. You understand what I'm saying? So the fear of not following what that old timer is telling you, and having other officers look at you differently and not be there and have your back if something jumps off, that fear is real. And that's what helps keep those younger people in line, so to speak. You understand? At least that's what I saw in corrections. And I would be comfortable saying it probably holds true in other areas of law enforcement too.
Oh, it absolutely does. Justin and I have talked many times about, we talk hours and hours and hours about all the problems, and sometimes, we just can't come up with the solution. And we've talked about this many a times, that, I really think that in order to see the change that we want, it's going to take maybe getting some generations out and some new generations in, but really focusing on the ones coming into the profession and how we're setting them up for success, and what we're introducing them to. You made a good point, and it's really similar on our side. You graduate the academy, you get in the squad car with your first FTO on your first shift, and they look at you and they say, "Hey, all that stuff you just learned in the academy, forget about it." Right? I'll teach you how to be a cop. And I'll be honest, some of it you probably should forget about. I mean, we have a lot of work we need to do in our academies here. I don't know if it's. I would imagine that it would be similar in other states, but then there are things that you don't need to get rid of, because that's where we're trying to implement the change is sometime through new curriculum in the academies, and it's really important that we put a lot of focus on what we're bringing the new people into, what kind of environment, and who we're pairing them up with. And, a lot of times the the best option to pair a new recruit up with might not be the 20-year veteran. It might be the 3-year veteran, because that 3-year cop could be doing the right things for the right reasons at the right time. And the 20-year veteran is absolutely not doing all the wrong things. So I believe that if we start investing a lot of our time and energy and holding value in that, we'll see that pay off in the long run.
I think that it's possible, but again, we talked about it tonight. It all starts with leadership. And if the leadership's not going to get off their butts and finally do what's right for everyone instead of just themselves and their inner circle, then I honestly feel like, and I don't think they're going to do it voluntarily, honestly. So I feel like there should be some type of oversight committee, public safety oversight, or whatever you want to call it, from the governor's office, and say, I want things straightened out and I want them done the right way. And we have an oversight committee that's going to oversee this and facilitate the process for whatever period of time. Because you know what? Some of our leadership are in positions just because of who they know. They're not qualified to do the job. They don't even know how to do the job. And you're running a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar organization. So yeah, you're going to surround yourself with your underlings who can help you get through. You're going to have them do this part of your job, this one do that part, and you're taking the credit. You're not, in some cases, competent to do the job that you're in. So if you're not competent to do that, then how do you expect change to really come into place? It's not going to, unless an outside source is involved.
And what's crazy to me, we talk about all these things, all these problems. You have a wrongful conviction. You have a incident where there's excessive use of force, a police brutality situation. All of the negative things that you see. What's crazy is the public doesn't understand that all of that comes from what's going on internally. All of it. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, minus the ones that are bad, right? So you've got people that are bad. Every profession does, okay? We say that all the time. That's fact. But our biggest battles that we fight, and the public doesn't understand it, is within our organizations, and we are fighting against each other. And then if we're not fighting against each other, we're fighting against these politicians and these policymakers. And it's our own fault. We are causing our own problems. And that's what I cannot wrap my mind around, why we cannot get beyond that. It is those that are in service that are causing the problems. And the public sees it, and they don't understand that, right? They don't see the internal conflicts going on. They don't see the political battles. And it just blows my mind that as the ones who are out here supposed to be helping people, being of service to people, we are literally just infighting. We've all turned on each other. Everybody wants control. Everybody wants power, and they use fear to keep those things going. And we are not helping those that need help. That's why you see the rate of recidivism. It's not changing because we are not freaking helping these people. And it really pisses me off, if we're being honest. I'm about to get fired up, actually.
Justin, but let me just say this. I agree with you. We're not helping the people, and you're right. All of this is created internally, in my opinion, but you got to look at it, at least I look at it, as the masses are being controlled by a select few. Those select few have been empowered because they belong to this little inner circle that has been in control for a very long time.
Centuries.
They're not going to voluntarily give up their control. They have their own agenda. Their agenda doesn't match the agency mission. Their agenda is for personal benefit. They're not going to voluntarily give that up. That's why there needs to be an outside force, oversight committee, to kind of balance what's going on. And then you can start to see some change. But when that oversight, in my opinion, that oversight committee comes in, they need to make some changes. There needs to be a change in leadership, because if you leave the same people in place with the same thought process, and once they know they're not being watched anymore, they go back to the same bad habits.
Yeah, that's so accurate. Oh, the stories we could tell, Cheryl. But I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think some of these oversight committees, like we just passed a law here in Texas, that, the Texas Rangers here in Texas, they're like the supreme law enforcement that exists. And they're usually the ones who come in, like if a police agency has a shooting or, evidence goes missing or just some major violation that's going on, the Texas Rangers will come in and investigate it. Well, for the longest time, whenever you had like the district attorney answers to nobody, at least here in Texas, and they can literally do what they want to do, and nobody has any say so. And somebody called the Texas Rangers show up, say, hey, somebody called and said this is going on. The DA's office literally has the power and authority to say, hey, no, nothing's going on here. We don't need you. See ya. Well, now we've passed a law in Texas to where the Texas Rangers now, if you make you can make a report to them, they will come in. Excuse me. They will come in and they will investigate it. Supposed to. But you know what's interesting about that too, Cheryl, is that these Texas Rangers office in our county. So, we're like right now we're in Dallas County. Now, Dallas County has a lot of Texas Rangers officed here, but you go to a smaller community. Okay. So I worked a lot in Anderson County. A lot of my story comes from Anderson County. Anderson County was extremely corrupt, and I believe still is. And so the Texas Rangers, though, form those relationships with these district attorneys, with these judges, with these police chiefs, with these sheriffs, and they're buddies, right? But so you're going to tell me that you're going to go ahead and give the Texas Rangers the authority to investigate their buddies? So I think when we speak on committees, you got to really put some thought into it. It can't be somebody who, it's got to be completely unbiased members of that committee that do these investigations. But you also have to be careful too, because if you're investigating a correctional officer, you're going to want a correctional officer on that committee, right? But maybe not necessarily one that's buddy with the rest of the committee or the employee itself. And same with the cops. Like, you're going to want a cop on this committee, but I don't think it should be a committee full of cops or full of correction officers. You get what I'm saying? Like, you got to be real cautious when you're looking at these committees, because I have seen these buddies investigating buddies, and that's a problem.
That's a big problem, and my suggestion would be not to have people who are intimately involved with some of the people that are being accused involved in the process. So if that means you have to pull, you can only have a DA from a different county investigate, or a ranger from a different county, to make sure that there's a minimal possibility of that personal relationship. However you do it, I think it can be done. Yes, you're right. It takes a lot of thought. You'll have to map out a really strategic plan, a solid strategic plan. But I think that it can be done. I'm listening to you, and I don't know the ins and outs about Texas, but I have ideas. So I know it's possible. It will be time consuming, but in the name of justice, it can be done.
Yeah, and it's worth it. I mean, you're right. In the name of justice, I believe it can be done. And it goes back to having those people surrender their power. You know, there's so many people that still want to hold that power and that authority, and they want to buck these changes and these processes, but it's just going to take courageous individuals. You know, when Failing Justice started, I was out of law enforcement, and some really crappy things happened to me. But I decided, I said, you know, I'm not going to be silenced. I'm going to tell my story. And so that's kind of how Failing Justice started. But now it's the same. I'm back in law enforcement, but nothing's changed as far as I'm still going to speak. I'm still going to, I mean, there's things going on with me right now. I'm going to be quite honest with you that eventually I'm going to tell the story. And I think that is what it takes, courageous individuals to sit down, have these conversations, form these plans, and move forward with making the change. And I think by sitting down us like this tonight, and, you know, I hope that this encourages somebody. That's always my hope, is that when we sit down and do this, that somebody's encouraged and somebody says, oh, well, I can do that. You know, that's what I hope for. And I appreciate, Cheryl, all the work that you've done. Very impressive. I tell people all the time, if corrections was the last job on the planet and it meant I had to work in a prison or live under a bridge, I would choose living under a bridge. So I really, I mean, I think it's extremely impressive that you had as long a career as you have, or had, and the fact that you are still out here fighting for change, positive change, to help everybody involved, not only justice impacted individuals, but also, you know, justice advocates. And so I respect you, and I'm glad, you know, I'm glad we connected. I'm glad you came on the show. And real quick, is there anything, well, first of all, is there anything else you want to say? And then I want you to let everybody know how they connect with you. Like, are you on the internet? How does people find your work, and how can people help you? So I'll let you finish out with that.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything as far as the topic that we've been talking about. I don't have anything else to add. I really enjoyed this conversation with the two of you guys. I've gotten some new insights about other law enforcement agencies and what happens in other states with these law enforcement agencies. And it reinforced my thought process that we might have different titles, different acronyms, but we really fight the same fight every single day. It's really standard what we go through, whether you are a city cop, state police, corrections. I see that we have the same challenges. And it's, for me, not anymore because I'm not working, but when I was working and I would run into people from different states who were experiencing some of the same challenges, it reinforced, it kind of regenerated, you know, my belief that I had to keep fighting, that it wasn't in this fight alone, that other people are going through the same thing. And if we connect and support each other, we could make it through. Whatever the storm is, we could make it through that storm together. So I commend you guys for what you do. I can only imagine how hard it is to still be active and doing what you do. So I do congratulate you. I wish you nothing but success. And I know it's a challenge. It's a challenge that you would stay under the bridge. You know, Justin, if I had to do what you guys were doing and be active while I'm doing it, I think I would say, move over and give me a spot under that bridge too, because I don't think I could do it. I really don't. As far as connecting with people, you know, anybody who wants to brainstorm about how they can make a positive difference in this fight for justice and change could reach me email, which is support at C like Charlie, V like Victor, M like Mary -enterprises.com. They can reach me on LinkedIn, Cheryl Morris, I'm listed as Cheryl Morris on LinkedIn. And I do have a website that's about to go under construction. So I really don't give that out. But so the best ways to get me is LinkedIn or email at this point. But once I get my website where I want it, then that will be an option as well.
Okay. And I will go ahead and link your LinkedIn and your email in our show notes. So if anybody wants to browse your LinkedIn and get in touch with you, they'll be able to do that through the show notes on any podcast platform, and then on YouTube, it'll be into the description. So, but I tell you, Cheryl, they're going to have to kill me before I shut up. So that's just fact. But I really appreciate your words, and I appreciate the value that you have brought over your 30 years to the justice system, and I appreciate the value that you brought to our show, and would like to definitely sit down and maybe do this again sometime. And thank you so much for coming on, and we appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that as well. And it's very nice meeting you, Preston.
You too.
And I'd be very, very honored to come back. I enjoyed the conversation tonight.
Absolutely. We appreciate you being here.
Crazy how somebody from another state like that, in a different setting, I mean, somewhat in the same profession, but in a different setting, has still ran into the same problems. And it's still just as important. Like, it's just because a lot of people give corrections officers and detention officers and jailers just, grief as if their job's not important. And especially cops, like there's this stigma that goes around, like, oh, you're a jailer, you're a correction officer, you're a detention officer, and you're beneath me. That's how I felt when I was 18. From 18 to 20, I worked in a detention facility, and that's how some officers made me feel. But I mean, our job and the job of corrections and jailers is just as important as putting on a badge and going out here in the community. There's not a lot of difference. The only difference is you're inside rather than outside. And I think it's crazy how she had a lot of the similarities.
Well, I mean, almost identical, man. I mean,
yeah.
a lot of the things that she touched on, I mean, I don't know how many times that you and I have talked about it over and over and over again. And like she said, I mean, even at the end of it, really, a lot of this boils down to we are in a desperate need to change the leadership. That's really what's going to get us going in the right direction. And until we get a change in leadership and the mentality of, I guess, what leadership is in this profession, it's probably just going to continue to be an uphill battle. And we'll make some headway. We'll make some change. We'll influence some people. But we're always going to have that authority figure just looming over and wait until we get out of the way so they can go back to doing what they were doing. I would agree. I think people in corrections, they don't get enough credit for the job they do, and the reality of it is that they're still in service to others. I mean, that's why they're there.
I would go out on a limb and say, in some areas, that maybe their job is more important, because we put those people in there.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's their life. They wake up every single day. They're in a cell. They're interacting with these correctional officers, and that's what they see day in and day out for however many years that they're in there. And so they have a big opportunity to influence these people and their thought processes on the type of person they want to be when they get out.
Right.
And just like she said, and how productive they want to be when they get out. And so that's why I think I'm all for the education in prison system because there's a stat. I wish I would have pulled it before we started this show, but there's a stat out there in favor of typically when somebody receives education and some sort of degree in prison, that number is so low of them going back.
Right.
I don't know what it is, but I read it the other day when I was when I knew Cheryl was coming on the show. I was looking at some stuff and I saw it and I said, man, that's pretty impressive. And so I'm for all these system and programs because just because somebody screwed up, right, doesn't mean that they cannot be different. I mean, we were talking before the show of how, on the phone on the way here of the things that we've overcame, who we were 4 or 5 years ago and further out isn't who we are now. So many times these people that get arrested and that go in the prisons, they get attached to a number and they're no longer, they're just a correction number at that point. They're no longer a person. At least to some. I've seen the treatment. And so I think that we've got to really step into that and hone in on that and realize, we have a big influence on these people. And not only for who they may potentially become, but what their perceptions are of law enforcement and corrections. We could literally make or break somebody's thought process on the system.
Yeah, I would agree, man.
And correct me if I'm wrong, real quick. Are we taught that? Because we're not. I have never, maybe you have been, but I have personally, nobody has ever set me down one-on-one or in a small class setting or in a large class setting and said, hey, guess what? The way you treat these people could make or break what kind of person they become. Nobody's ever taught me that.
Oh, yeah. It's just not a popular conversation. You make a good point. I mean, everything that we do in this profession will have a positive or negative impact on somebody's life. Every decision that we make has that ability. And just because somebody is making a mistake in their life, breaking the law, whatever the circumstances may be, it doesn't necessarily mean that the impact that you have with that individual has to be negative. There can always be positive. And I think that we owe it. I think there's a lot of work to be done in the correctional systems. And like you said, you reference back to education and programs while you're in. And I wonder if the success rate that you see on the statistics, if it's because they're getting education,
it's because somebody cares,
or if it's because somebody is treating them giving them an opportunity like any other human being is getting to do. Because let me ask you this: what is the purpose of receiving a sentence and doing time? What is the purpose of that? What are we trying to accomplish as a society, as a nation? I would think that you're going to give something up for something that you did that negatively impacted somebody else, right? What these individuals are giving up is their freedom. They are having their God-given freedom stripped from them because they made a mistake. Somebody explained to me and obviously there's circumstances, and not that, this isn't. I would measure this exactly the same across the board, but I'd be willing to say the majority, right? Like maybe people who aren't violent offenders or haven't taken somebody's life, but what good are we doing to that individual and then society when that individual gets out if we put them in the correctional system and then continue to treat them like they're not human?
Yeah, I mean, and not only are you taking away their freedoms, right? But in that freedom, there's a lot of things in that. One of the things that I think about often, especially now more than ever before, what about these kids, right? So you take somebody and you put them in the correctional system, and they have young kids. And there are stats out there also that say what happens to children when their parents are not around, right? So there's a lot. She said it on the earlier. These kids come to these prisons and they want to visit their parents. Everybody's all uptight about it. There should be change on that front too, because these kids need their parents.
Yeah.
Even if the parents locked up. But we also have to I think evaluate the crimes. I've made it known plenty of times, and a lot of people disagree with me, but these victimless crimes such as possession of marijuana, there's states that have legalized it, but people are still sitting in prison because it was legal back 5, 10, 15 years ago. And these kids have grown up and they're out here in these streets behaving however they want to behave because they don't have that structure and that parent figure at home.
I would just continue to break the family.
That's it.
And I can tell you what, I mean, we, as a society, we do a good job at breaking the family without needing to utilize the criminal justice system to continue to break it further, right? Because life's just hard enough already. People have enough that they're dealing with. Maybe we should start utilizing our positions within the criminal justice system as law enforcement officers or as correctional officers or as people in positions of power within the prosecutor's office and the court system. Maybe we should start using our positions to influence bringing the families back together instead of tearing them apart. Maybe we should start thinking about the impact that the decisions we make will have on those individuals' children, or what good it'll do sometimes. Even I mean, what is the risk worth the reward on sometimes taking a father or mother out of a home for mistakes in life, because again, we're all human. It's this job, this profession, man, I struggle with it sometimes because I tell you what I struggle with. I really struggle sometimes being in a position to make a decision that will affect somebody's life because they made a mistake. Because I'll be the first one to tell you, man, I've made plenty of them. I have, because I'm human. There's a lot of things in life that I just wish I would have chose a different path on, or chose to make a different decision. And now I'm in a position out here to make decisions on others' behalf because of mistakes they made. And I think if maybe we would remember that in law enforcement and corrections, and remember that sometimes that we can use our positions to truly help someone, maybe offer a little grace or forgiveness, little guidance. You know, I think that has just as much opportunity to influence change.
Yeah, man, this we've talked about it. You and I actually haven't sat down and had a podcast by ourselves in a while. And so I was just sitting here thinking a minute ago, like, man, we haven't sat down and done this in a while. Kind of miss it. We've had a lot of guests and stuff. But the thing is, I don't know where I was going with that, but it goes back to, I think, the heart. Because I think everything falls back on that. And then it falls back on from what's going on within your organization. If, you think about a fire ring. I have a fire ring at my house. We built it the end of last winter. I want to say last spring. The bricks, you dig down a couple inches, you put the rocks. Fire is it's meant to be in that fire ring. Okay. It's really cool, but it's really dangerous. But you move some of those bricks and you let that fire out. That fire is going to destroy everything that it touches. And so what happens is, in our organizations, we're on fire.
I was blazing, brother.
It's blazing. And what happens is you open up that back door and those guys go get in that squad. Or they get in their personal cars and go home. Whatever. It's like Cheryl said, you have to take care of your staff. And that's what the general public doesn't understand. They don't see that side of things. All they see is a cop came out here and broke somebody's arm. They see a cop come out here and shot somebody that shouldn't have been shot. They see a wrongful arrest or a constitutional violation. And some of those things are just bad, terrible people because they love power. Fact.
Yeah.
But not all of them.
No.
A lot of them, it's stress-induced because their agency doesn't care about them, and they know it, and they're having hell from within. And then they go home, they're fighting with their wife, they're having marital problems, whatever the case may be. They're having financial problems because they don't get paid worth of crap. They're having to work all these extra jobs. And then they're expected to go out here on the road and perform perfectly. And so we're letting that movie Elemental, where the people are fire and they, like, whatever they go out, they touch, it catches fire. That's what we're doing with our cops sometimes and our correction officers, because we are not taking care of them. And I always want to say, you can never blanket everything, because again, there are just some bad people out there, and they need to be exposed and they need to be the ones in prison. But then you have the cases of the ones that I was just talking about. But the public they don't understand that. And honestly, the public doesn't care. And honestly, they shouldn't care, right? It's not their
job.
It's not their job. They expect a service, right? They're taxpayers. They expect their police officers to be trained and come out and do the right thing. It all falls back on the leadership. It's the leadership's fault. Period.
Yeah. You make a lot of good points, and she did as well this evening. And I'll leave here tonight. I I guess with a sense of reassurance that it's not just our side of the profession and the criminal justice system, that other sides of the profession are struggling with the same issues. But I also believe here a little more discouraged because we're going to have to tackle that side of the profession as well and correct that. And I know for a fact, man, just speaking from firsthand experience, we can't even get it fucking right on our end.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's ridiculous. Like you said, you get a ring of fire and you move a rock, it's going to start spreading. And that's what we do 9 times out of 10. When you see these things that happen, you know, a cop makes a mistake or there is some injustice, somebody is done wrong. Or let's talk about on the professional side, within our organizations, you see officers go out and, have personal life issues or mental health issues, wellness issues. It's our own doing. And it's a lack of leadership. It's a lack of caring about your people and continuing to do it over and over and over again and never recognizing it, never having anybody stand up and say, hey, let's just start doing it differently. And we continue to make those mistakes inside. And like you said, it spreads outside. And I do think it's key and it's critical that to attack the problems we see within our criminal justice system, we really start working on the organizations and the people that are in it performing the service. Because that's, if you didn't have them, then you wouldn't have a criminal justice system at all, right? And don't get me wrong, we go on here a lot and talk about a lot of things and times where we make mistakes, right? And we want to fix that. And to fix it means to talk about it, right? And have those vulnerable moments, bridge that gap, bringing people on and talk about it and admit our mistakes. But I don't ever want to undervalue this profession and the true mission and purpose that we try to accomplish. It is honorable and a noble profession. And I mean that in the sense that somebody will selflessly sign up for a job and complete service to others, someone besides themselves. So I don't want to ever undervalue that. But I think that we also, at the same time, leaders don't value that. They don't value what the ones out there doing the job are actually giving up and what they go through to come to work every day, to continue to come to work every day, what they're battling, and then the impact that'll have on others, and not just the ones we serve, but maybe those individuals' families. I don't know, man. Like, I just get on my soapbox sometimes and just start spiraling downhill because it just gets so damn depressing. But
no, because I mean, like I said, I believe all the problems that the public sees, it is tied,
without a doubt,
it is tethered to a much bigger problem from within. And it's our own fault.
Yeah.
And when I say our own fault, not that I'm perfect. What I mean is that it is the quote unquote leadership or lack thereof. And that's exactly what I would say 90% of the problems tie to. 90% of the problems tie to poor leadership. And so which brings me to my next point. We need to wrap it up. I'm super excited to say that we're going to have on our next podcast, we're going to have Dr. Travis Yates. Dr. Travis Yates is the author of Courageous Police Leadership. He travels the country. He is a over 20-year vet with the Tulsa Police Department, Oklahoma. I think he retired as a major. And Dr. Travis Yates is going to be on our show on our next release in March. So I'm super happy about that. I hope everybody tunes into that. And he's going to bring some really good conversation and perspectives to police leadership and why it's lacking and what we do to fix it. So I'm super excited about that. Good show tonight. I think overall, really appreciative of Cheryl and always appreciative of you being a co-host coming on. So I will just say, go ahead.
I'm just saying, I'm glad to be here, man.
Yeah, I will say, guys, failingjustice.org, failingjustice.org, at Failing One Justice for all social media platforms. The podcast is on all major podcast platforms. Just type in Failing Justice. Look for our logo here. And we just, we take some heat for some of the things we do here, but our whole point to this show is to just bring awareness, bring these conversations to the table, try to bridge the gap and make a change. And that's what we're here for. And we thank you all for listening. We thank you all for watching and supporting our show. And until next time, we're going to go ahead and close this show out. Thanks for tuning in tonight.
It's not just an organization, it's a call to action. Join us on this journey, satisfaction. Dismantle barriers, build with passion. For a future with justice is not a fraction. Yeah, failing justice. Yeah, failing justice. Yeah, failing justice. Failing justice. Failing justice.